Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the SSB Law Victim Support Group. We wanted to come on tonight and give like an update. You know, the purpose really is to highlight the systemic failures of cavity wall insulation and the devastating impact on homeowners. And we want to call on the government for immediate intervention, and we invite the media to give us maximum exposure in this. We're going to be talking about the impact of cavity wall failures on people's lives, and it's a very widespread issue. There's thousands and thousands of homes in disadvantaged areas that are now unfit for living. And we've got mould, damp, structural damages making homes unsafe for families. The many are vulnerable people as well. And not just that, but there's also health and financial impacts. We're in a situation where we've got rising fuel poverty. And what it means is that mouldy homes require more heating and more energy to heat the house. So instead of saving money, you're actually using more energy, which goes completely against the net zero targets. And then on top of that, there's health issues, you know, respiratory illnesses, poor mental health due to living conditions, and so on. So what I'd like to do is invite some of the victims in the group to share their stories with you, their personal experiences, just really, really quickly. And I'd like you to start off by stating your name, which town you're from, and then the impact that there's been to you and your families. And it could be financial, it could be health, it could be anything that's adversely impacted you. So Sharon, could I invite you to go first, please? If you'd like to unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Sharon. I'm from Burnley. I had cavity wall installed in 2014. When it was originally installed, there wasn't really a great deal of noticing until it started to come to the very cold months. And the temperature difference throughout the house was very noticeable. Some rooms were okay. Other rooms, it was colder in that room than what it was outside. I had an instance where there was water actually running down the wall, and it was condensation from the cavity wall, where they'd missed putting parts of it in. It took it back through the walls and started to run down my main walls. It did what I think is quite a bit of a damage to the property. I'd rebuilt the property pretty much when I actually bought it. And I had to go back through and start doing a lot of repairs and things. The impact really was that it started to degrade my house. This was a house that I'd put back together and tried to make as a family home. And it was doing a lot of damage slowly but surely. I didn't actually realise how much damage until I got a solicitor involved, and they sent a survey around and looked at the property. The outcome of the survey was that the damage, or to have the installation removed, would probably cost twice as much as what my property was actually worth. I was advised to be able to remove the isothane, which is the type of cavity wall that I have. To be able to remove that, I would need to remove the roof. I would have to take down the second layering of the brickwork to be able to chisel it out, which basically meant that only the inner layer of bricks would be there for the property. This was, I can't say in words. I can't put in words. I think the only word that springs to mind is despair and absolutely devastating. I got the house to where I wanted it to be, and having the cavity wall put into my property was not only damaged it when it had gone in, but it was continued to damaging it as well. And it wouldn't improve. I needed this isotherm removed out of my property. Several years down the line, I try and keep on top of the property as much as I can. I do have mold patches that come through here and there, but it's a constant battle. I can't put a lot of things up against the wall because if I do, I end up with mold and damp patches. I've got 2 young children in the property with myself. And as you can imagine, this is it. Yeah, it's a full-time job trying to run around and keep on top, as well as the damage that I know that it's probably doing to the joists in the property and other areas. It's devastating. For something that we thought that was going to improve our properties and help us with our bills, and also something that the government was pushing for us to do as well. It's turned into a never-ending hell, between legal services, surveyors' reports, and all the rest of this that comes with it. It's just mortifying, absolutely mortifying, that the government has backed for these people to come into our properties and basically demolish them, because that's what's going to happen to my property in the end, more than likely. I don't know if my property is saleable, and yeah, I'm very much stuck in a rut at the moment. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are much worse off than I am. However, that's not to underestimate that it is affecting my property. It's affecting myself. I suffer with anxiety and stress now because it's just constant. It's never ending. And you think that the little things that you do to your property to maintain it and keep it in a good sense of repair, and it's not worth it because it's damaged and it's just going to continue to be damaged. It's just devastating and so stressful. 2014 and we're now on 2025 and still fighting to try and get these repairs done to our property. All I want is for my property to be put back to its original state. I'm not interested in extra money or any of that rubbish. I just want my home back for myself and my children, and peace of mind to know that it's safe and sound. That's all I want. So that's my story.
Sharon, thank you for sharing that. It's heartbreaking to hear. And you know, you're one of our long-term supporters, and we really appreciate everything you do in helping to raise awareness. So thank you. Could I invite Debbie, please, to speak? Is Debbie with us?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, you're there,
Eventually.
Debbie.
Just a bit of technical difficulties.
Okay.
So basically, I had my cavity wall insulation installed in 2014, obviously through the government grant. 25-year guarantee. It's coming from government. It's got to be right, hasn't it? Obviously, that's not happened. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that I'm from the Lancashire area. We noticed more cosmetic things within our home. It started with a thin crack on the plaster. So each spring we'd fill the crack, rub it down, repaint it. Obviously, we're in 2025 now. We've now got to a stage where them cracks are no longer cracks. It is basically just the plaster dropping off the wall back to the brick. And this is in our living room. This is what we see day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, you know. It's a place where our guests come and unfortunately, it becomes a talking point that we're still in this situation. I have had Damien Mercer from Cavity Extraction Limited, who took a stone out from the outer wall, which clearly shows a massive void. So basically, these patches are breaking out wherever there's a void. Because obviously it's warm air, it's in a cold wall, and it's breaking the plaster down from the inside. My mum lives with me, who's disabled and a pensioner. Obviously, she spends a lot of time at home, probably more than me. It's impacted her really badly with regards to her mental health. You know, when we could patch it up in the spring, we could just about get through, but now it's you can't even really patch it up, if you know what I mean. The little cracks aren't little cracks; they're just big holes that the filler's just not going to stick to. With regards to myself, yeah, it's stressful. You know, you try and do the right things, and you know, you end up on the losing side, and I find that a little bit hard to accept. Things are frustrating. I've gone through the guarantee, which, believe it or not, has a limitation of, on mine, is £30,000, or the contractual value, which is whichever is the least. In my case, it was just over £4,000. To have the wall insulation removed, it's going to cost me at least £56,000, and that's without putting right the cosmetics inside. I can't find that. You know, I work part-time because I look after my mum. I just can't find that. It's not even nearly reachable. It's it's devastating. The government don't want to know, you know, and then that's without all the rest of the hassle that's come along from that. And sometimes you just feel like you can't battle anymore. Nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to help. You know, I just want my house to be a home again. That's all I want. You know, like anybody wants. It's a basic right to have a home. So, and it's not that. It's just a house.
Thank you for sharing that, Debbie, and also for bringing up the issue of the guarantees, which virtually aren't worth the paper that they're written on.
They certainly aren't. They certainly aren't.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay.
Okay, if we move on now to our next volunteer victim, Yusuf, would you like to say something? Yusuf Patel?
Yeah, sorry, I just do the unmute. Yeah, I'm Yusuf Patel from the Blackburn area. I had my cavity wall insulation on 2014. Since they've done a cavity wall insulation, I realized I got a little bit wet patches and water's coming in my properties. So within 3 months, I reported the company who done the cavity wall insulation, and the cavity wall insulation part of the government scheme, which is called EC company, came down to my property to cavity wall insulation. They came to my house and tried to rectify the problem for 3 times. They couldn't do it. After that, I spent about £5,000 to rectify my house, replastered everything. I done my property to rectify I thought might be problem go away if you do the plastering. So I spent about over £5,000. But still my property is the same situation. The mold, dams, copying of properties. I had the company done the cavity wall insulation. They gave me the guarantees. The guarantee was only £9,050. I called the builders to rectify. How much it cost me for to rectify the problem? It has cost me about £23,000. Now we done a 2014 the cavity wall insulation. Still the same problem, dam and a mole. It cost me loads the money for the electric and gas bill to warm my house. Also, it's just like every 6 months I need to repaint the wall because everywhere is got a yellow mark on the walls, everything. So it's just like just stressful, and I'm just a little bit. It's a government scheme. Why they left on that situation like 2000, almost 10 years, and no one coming. We send an email to every single department. It's only reply, okay, we're looking into really quick, but no one's coming to solve the problem.
Thank you, Yusuf.
Debra.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. We appreciate you coming in tonight. I don't think Shabnam is with us. So we've got apologies from Rozeena who couldn't make it. Laura, would you like to share Rozeena's story really quickly?
Yes, no problem. So Rose is from Burnley. She is a mum of 3 with asthma, and she's spoken of the stress of living with damp mould after cavity wall insulation failed in her home. So Rose, who suffers from OCD, anxiety and depression, had CWI installed in 2014 in 2 bedrooms in her property, as well as her front living room. She was told she was eligible under the government green scheme for free insulation due to her household low income. But 18 months later, the 42-year-old noticed patches of mould and damp begin to appear in all 3 rooms for the first time. And around this time, she was also diagnosed with asthma for the first time in her life. She said she started with bad asthma just before COVID. She couldn't breathe properly. She was coughing and wheezing all the time. She said it affects her jobs. And she says the mould always returns despite treating and painting over it every few months and using dehumidifiers in each room. So she was door knocked for compensation, and she has limited her family has limited English, and not only is she dealing with the physical devastation of living with mould and damp caused by this insulation, she also lives in fear of a bill dropping through her door for the no win no fee claims. So physically and mentally, this scandal has been absolutely devastating for Rose. So she's a powerful example of the different ways it is decimating people's health.
Thank you, Laura. And can I just ask, are there any other victims on here who would like to share the story, who haven't come forward to say that they would like to? Is there anybody else?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, Matt, go for it. If you'd like to say where you're from and then give us what your circumstances are.
Yeah, so I'm Matt from Burnley. And again, had a similar experience having cavity wall insulation installed around about 2013-14. And yeah, ever since we had it installed, we started seeing damp patches. So then, yeah, we've been treating it, and we're an end terrace, so we've seen it pretty much every wall. And one of the main things that we've seen, we got door knocked around 2019-ish, and said we may have a claim. Went on a no win no fee claim with a solicitor, and this dragged on for years. And then obviously we know about SSB going bankrupt into liquidation, and then I think our claim was due to close, or we told them to close it because they changed how the survey had gone with the cavity wall and said it was installed properly. They told us to stop the claim, which we did, and then we didn't hear anything from them until I think it was April last year, which again we didn't hear from them. We got a interim charging notice through the door, which was for £21,000. Put a charging order on our house. So obviously that caused quite a bit of stress from a financial side. We had to go to court in August to dispute it, and we've got a delay on till this August. But again, it's still something that's still outstanding, and again causing further stress.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Matt. And are you from Burnley as well?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Richard, if you unmute.
Here we go. Right. I'm a bit of a novice to this, actually, because I've only heard about this group yesterday. But yeah, we got ours done in 2014. I'm from Burnley, by the way. I live in an end terrace. Sounds pretty much the same story as Matt, to be honest, because we got all three walls done. The first year was brilliant. The house was absolutely banging warm. And then it's obviously deteriorated from then. And we've got the same. We've had mould, plaster falling off, etc., etc. And then I got contacted by SSB to put a claim in. They sent a guy around, did all his survey, said, yeah, this is going to cost about 120 grand to put right, because they'd have to take all the outside skin down. We'd have to move out, live in a hotel for 6 months, etc. So the claim started going through. And then SSB, they dropped it for some reason. He said they kept ringing, they kept contacting me and saying, oh yeah, they're going to settle out of court. They're going to settle out of court for about 80 grand. So I was like, well, so what happens to the other 40,000 then? Do I got to find it? Oh no, you'll be able to sort it out for less than that. And then they just dropped it for some reason. They didn't tell me why. He just said, no, we're not going any further. And then again last year, I got a letter through the post from a debt collectors. Not as much as Matt's. Mine was only for about 3.5 grand. But luckily, SSB was still in business. So after doing a bit of digging, finding out what this debt was, because the debt collectors wouldn't tell me what it was. It was just I owed some money to Royal Sun Alliance. So I did a lot of digging, found out who it was from, and it was to do with this. So I actually managed to get SSB to pay this bill for me. So I've got no financial stress from that. What has cost me is my house. The inside of the house was literally falling off. There was no plaster on any walls anywhere. So I've had to spend about 10 grand to. I've put insulation board up on all the external walls, got it replastered, got it redecorated, which seems to have solved the problem internally. But obviously, we're still going to have a problem externally if it comes to selling it, because when the surveyors come and survey it, the walls are just full of damp from top to bottom. So yeah, that's what's happened at our end.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing that with us. And you're one of the lucky ones if SSB have paid your bill. The majority of people aren't so fortunate.
Well, I have been contacted in the meantime by another solicitor who I can't remember who it was, because I didn't pursue it, because they weren't bothered about the cavity wall insulation. They were trying to work on behalf of people to get the bills cancelled. But I can't remember who it was, because I didn't need to take it any further because mine had already been cancelled. But they were contacting people who were in debt because of SSB to work on their behalf to cancel the SSB debts, if you like.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has heard of that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your contribution, Richard, and we look forward to seeing you in the victim support group. Is there anybody else who'd like to have the opportunity to share before we move on? Yep. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll move on to the process of how we all ended up at SSB in the first place. And this is for background information for the media and for MPs. We see the root cause of all this is it started with a government grant for cavity wall insulation, which were inadequately monitored. The door knockers generate leads. I'm just going to give a quick overview on this. The door knockers generate leads targeting vulnerable areas, and they also disregard whether or not properties are suitable, such as stone-built properties. The leads are sold to installation companies who draw down grant funding. Installers turn up without having done a pre-survey, and they fill the cavities with unsuitable products without removing any of the rubble, and they leave gaps and voids in the cavities, which then leads to damp and mould. And there's also no post-installation survey carried out, which there should be. And then what happens is that in time, the lead generation companies get lists of properties, I think it's from Ofgem, who have cavity wall insulation installed. And then they go around to the homes that have had the insulation, they door knock, say, do you have damp and mould in your property? We can help you with that. We've got somebody who'll do it on a no-win, no-fee basis. So people say, oh, great, yeah, we need to get it sorted out. But then these leads go to non-regulated intermediary companies such as Housing Triage, which is like a claims management company. And they then sell the leads to bulk claims law firms such as SSB Law. Housing Triage were paid by SSB for the surveys and for progressing the paperwork. And SSB Law knew, or ought to have known, that leads were generated by door knockers. So they're using third parties to generate leads to get around the regulations. Domestic energy assessors visit the properties to do a survey and overinflate the claims. And this scares the householders because they're saying these huge costs. You know, we've heard already that, you know, people have said it's going to cost 120,000 to have your home repaired. And this is what they were doing. And they're using templates, and often the information that they provide is incorrect. The claimant has to correct it. The surveys are signed off by a qualified RIC surveyor who has not personally visited the property. Some of the surveyors were directors for a surveying company, and there was a conflict of interest because they had a financial interest in overinflating claims. So some surveyors were questioned by courts on cases due to a lack of independence, and towards the end there were no expert witnesses who would work with SSB Law, which is a major factor in the failures. Following Ofgem's fraud investigations, some of the domestic energy assessors subsequently lost their accreditation, and at no time are householders advised to check their guarantees or contact the cavity wall installation installer if they're still trading. But you see, by this time, most installers have gone out of business. And a lot of them, Phoenix, what they do is they set up other companies, including extraction companies. So therefore, they're getting paid to install the work and they're getting paid to extract. Totally wrong. The problem with SSB Law was the administration of claims was very, very slow. In some cases, it took 12 months just for the initial survey report to be signed off. Claims weren't progressed, they just sat there. And in the October before SSB Law collapsed, many people received letters saying their case had little chance of success. Claims that had gone to court were being charged from defendants to the claimants, but the bills were being sent directly to SSB Law, who ignored the majority of them, and they didn't inform the claimants that these bills had come in. And this happened over a period of months. So claimants thought that their cases had been closed. And then some receive CCJs and they can't get a mortgage or even a mobile phone contract through no fault of their own. For some victims, the first they knew about owing any money was when bailiffs turned up on the doorstep. Can you imagine that? You know, you're at home with your family, you go to work, and then the bailiffs arrive saying that they're going to take your TV and your children's toys. How absolutely dreadful is that? The other issue is that victims were not told about ATE insurance policies. That's after the event insurance policies. And these were invalid because SSB law didn't comply with the terms of the insurance policy. Therefore, the insurers won't pay out. So this is beyond the control of any of the clients, and it's a major flaw in the current system. It should not be allowed to happen. So that's the first part. We've had a few people join us. Are there any other people on the call that would like to share their story before we move on to the next bit?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Shanna. Yes, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I just want to say it was because we felt so isolated and no one knew anything about it at the time. I almost felt like we were treated like criminals. I mean, I was one of the first ones who was sent the bill. And it absolutely, my life it was awful. I used to lock the doors because I was scared that the bailiffs would come. I'd warn my children not to open the door, you know, from not either having been in any kind of trouble or doing anything wrong. And it really affected my mental health, my well-being in general. And I didn't realise at the time what I'd done wrong, but because I didn't know what was going on, and obviously there was no group set up, and nobody else was aware of anything that was going on. I couldn't really speak to anyone about it either, and I felt so isolated that I just was afraid to go out. I stayed indoors, and our world just collapsed around us. We paid the money, so when we were going back and forth, it was you need to have it now, you need to pay it. We had 2 weeks. Within a week, we had to get that money together. £12,000 is a lot of money to pull together when you don't have that means. So we borrowed. We sold things, and it was just, even now when I speak about it, I feel emotionally it still affects me. So I've kind of closed the door and said, right, this has happened. Now we've got the support and more people are actually aware of what happened. And I've made myself stronger because I know the outcome from this is, something is actually being done about it now. Whereas at the time, there was no support there whatsoever. I felt like a criminal. I felt like I'd done something wrong. And we got the CCJ on the house. We got everything. And it was an awful, awful thing for someone to have gone through, for everyone. I mean, I'm English speaking and I didn't have any problem in communicating, but those vulnerable people who couldn't communicate, who didn't know what was going on. And there were so many people who it affected more than, it's not just something that it affects you mentally, socially. You're afraid to go out. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? We're a very respectful community, and for bailiffs to come at your door and say, we're taking your possessions, and it's an awful, awful, awful thing to happen to anyone.
Sharon, just thank you so much for your bravery in speaking out. And yes, it is an awful thing to happen to anyone. And one thing that people have said to us is, thank God we found the victim support group.
Absolutely. because there was no support from, the other side when we were contacting, I can't remember the name of the people who were actually, who were out wanting the money, EDF, and there was the pressure from them was unreal. It was unreal, and the way you were spoken to, the way it was handled. I spoke to SRR, I spoke to Oliver, and it was like, oh, well, we're moving offices, we're doing this, we're doing that. Everything right from the beginning, it was an absolute sham. You talk about scams, it was a total scam. And, it makes you more aware of actually innocent people and vulnerable people being targeted. And it's not fair. And the thing is, nothing's been done about it. Even now, when I get leaflets through my door, people knocking. I mean, when we initially got the knock through the door, it was like, oh, your neighbours have actually done the same, and they're complaining about, what they have the property and how it needs to be insulated, or they're up the road are having it done. And we thought, oh yeah, if everyone's having it done, we might as well have it done as well. It'll help. And there's no support there. They're still being targeted, and it breaks my heart to think how many more families and how will be destroyed. I mean, I'm not young, but I was one of those who was to overcome it. But for the elderly, or for someone who doesn't understand what's going on, to be targeted in this way, I mean, there should be something there to stop, and this should stop happening to people, because it's totally criminal. It is absolutely criminal.
And this is why we're campaigning for change, to try and stop these things from happening again. Could I just check, Shannon, are you in Burnley?
No, we're in West Yorkshire.
West Yorkshire.
Uh-huh.
Lovely. Thanks very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is, I just want to finish off this little bit by talking about how you can see we've got a total lack of trust in the system. There's been a big breakdown. The homeowners are disillusioned with government-backed schemes. The guarantees offer minimal protection, leaving victims without recourse. And recently, we've written to the government and got a response, and their advice is completely outdated. First of all, they say that consumers should be entitled to repair work by original installers. Well, that's unhelpful because the majority of them have ceased trading. They say contact the guarantee provider. Well, as you've heard from the testimonies, the guarantee providers pay minimally. They don't cover the cost of extraction. Some people have only had £1,000 paid out. Some have got a maximum of 20,000. But this does not cover the cost of extraction, which is many, many thousands more than that. They say Trustmark can support you if your installation was since May 2022. Well, that doesn't help the SSB victims because their claims were prior to this. And then they say for other consumers, i.e. SSB victims, guidance is on the government website. And when you go to the government website, one of the things is to contact Ofgem. The energy supplier is not required to provide redress according to Ofgem. And Ailsa White has provided me with her documentation where, she's contacted Ofgem, and there's absolutely no recourse whatsoever through Ofgem. So that's not an option for us. Also, the Minister states that it's not appropriate for government to intervene, this is with SSB clients, due to ongoing investigations into SSB by the SRA, and also the SRA is being investigated by the Legal Services Board. And what they're saying is until those reports have been and studies have been concluded, they cannot intervene. Well, we disagree with that, because what we're not doing is asking the government to intervene in any part of the legislative process. We are asking them to intervene in their government grant schemes, which have been inadequately monitored and left householders in a state that they're in now. So it's not good enough that the government isn't taking action on this. Recently, we were delighted when the government provided redress for the victims of a later eco measure who had solid wall insulation fitted, and they now have redress under their scheme. But theirs was far later than the SSB victims. So what are you going to do about it, government? You know, you need to act now. We need immediate investigations. So what I'd like to do is just halt for a moment before we move on to the next part that Laura's going to cover, just to see if any of the media representatives who are listening in the background have any questions. Because if you do have any questions, we're happy to take those, and then we'll go on to part 2. No.
Hello, sorry, it's Katie. I couldn't work out how to unmute.
Kate.
I'm from Granada Reports, but we've got I couldn't log on initially, so we've got a separate one as well. Yeah, I've just been sent this link today, and it's just listening to all your stories is absolutely heartbreaking. And we're hoping to carry a line tonight. So I just think if anyone's spoken who spoke on camera, would they mind if we used a little clip of that tonight to sort of summarise sort of what you're calling for today? Maybe if you have got an issue, you could write it in the chat box and let me know if you don't want to be included in that.
That's great, Katie. Thank you for that. We did sort of warn people that the media would be covering it, and we said to let us know in advance if anybody had any issues with that being reported on. So feel free to go ahead. Did you say that you're going to put that out tonight?
Hopefully, yeah. I'm just sort of listening out. Sorry, forgive me, I missed the start because I couldn't log on. So I just sort of need to work out what the meeting is about tonight, sort of to write that as the top line, and then hopefully use a little clip from someone. I'm also, if that's okay, going to just put my email address into the chat. So if anyone does want to be featured in the future, if we're doing any stories, then maybe we'll have contacts to get hold of people. Obviously, we're based in the Northwest, so it'd be anyone sort of Northwest based. But if there is anyone, I know Shanna, I think, was from Yorkshire, you know, but I could pass on your details to one of my colleagues over there. So I'll pop that in, and then if anyone wants to do anything in the future to keep it in the spotlight, then you can let me know.
That's great, thank you. And I'll send you the replay as soon as the meeting's finished. I'll upload it to our YouTube channel and send you the link for that.
That's lovely. Thanks so much, Deborah.
So we'll go on to the second part now, which is the failing net zero programmes and the erosion of public trust. Laura's going to lead on this second part, and she's going to be going through some facts and figures and what our demands are for the MPs, for government, and what we want to have happen. So Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Deborah. So the government has set up these schemes because they have a legal obligation to reach net zero by 2050 and to ensure that nobody is living in fuel poverty in the UK by 2030. So we're not saying, don't lift people out of fuel poverty, don't insulate, don't try to make homes more energy efficient. We don't want anyone living in fuel poverty. But this is a plea to the government that if you are going to do it right, because there are so many lives that have been devastated by this scheme. Now, trading standard stats show that there is a declining public confidence in these schemes. There is about 18% of households, that's 5 million, that are unwilling to participate in these net zero schemes. And the government has got a long way to go to reach net zero and its 2030 target, fuel poverty target. Because less than half of homes in England, that's 48%, had an EPC band C by 2022. And according to trading standards, 28 million UK homes must be upgraded to band C by 2050 to meet net zero targets. And the charity National Energy Action has estimated that 6 million households were still in fuel poverty in the UK in October 2024. So that means 1 million people every year need to be lifted out of fuel poverty. So you can see the government's going to want to go hard on insulation. And for us, fixing the homes that have been ruined by failed insulation should be seen as part of the solution to getting to net zero. For us, it's like trying to sail in a boat to net zero with holes in it, because the ruined homes are hemorrhaging energy. They are less energy efficient. They're using more energy to heat. And as an extractor has told us, it is like trying to heat a wet blanket around your home before you even start trying to heat the home. So some of the reasons why the public faith has been lost in this scheme, as we've heard tonight about rogue traders and the devastation it's caused to homes, the health impact, but also it all starts back with Ofgem, and some of Ofgem's reports, their eco reports, show that they rejected nearly 17,000 energy saving measures following investigations into suspected fraud. So this means that those nearly 20,000 energy saving measures cannot contribute towards the government's goal to reach net zero and end fuel poverty. And so issues that Ofgem explored during its fraud investigations include alleged falsified documents, misrepresentation and EPC falsification. And in its reports, Ofgem demands better due diligence. And what Ofgem also reported was poor compliance by energy suppliers. So companies like Utilita and Extra Energy missed targets with low consumer engagement. And this is all in Ofgem's own eco report, so it's out there in the public domain. And there is, according to trading standards, there is consumer confusion and disengagement is rife. 5 million households are deterred by uncertainty over trusted installers. They don't know who to trust, and funding options. And a key thing here is the high failure rate. So again, Ofgem reported in 2015 that 10% of retrofitted homes had technical failures. And we also believe there is inadequate monitoring of the installations. In fact, only 5% of installations were inspected, according to Ofgem, leaving many cases of non-compliance unaddressed. And then we have the cost of these government green schemes. Trading Standards estimates that upgrading homes for net zero will cost an estimated £249.5 billion. And some of these schemes, like Eco, is actually paid for by the public. It is paid for by an 8% levy on our energy bills. And if going back to the failure rate, which is 10%, and billions have already been spent on these schemes, this means that we have lost millions of public money. And millions have been lost to inefficiencies. And we have to bear in mind that we're living in a cost of living crisis, and there was a record high energy debt of 3.7 billion in October 2024, according to Ofgem. So it is really important that we get this scheme right, not just to prevent the devastation that we're seeing in homes up and down the country, but also because it's hitting everybody's pockets. We're all in a cost of living crisis. Lots of people are struggling with the increasing energy bills, and so we want this to be done right, and we want it to be value for money for the public. So the government is introducing its warmer homes plans. It's recently told us some updates about it, and it says that there will be more to come. It will let us know more about how it is going to protect consumers. And what we are saying is, please act on this soon, because victims have already waited years for reforms. So we want to know, and we are asking MPs to please take this forward to Parliament. How will the Warm Homes Plan ensure protection and fair compensation for existing victims? It was fantastic to hear about the measures taken against rogue installers of external wall, solid wall insulation, but we know how many people with cavity wall insulation are suffering. And so we want to see these reforms extended to them. We want to see remediation for their homes too, because the devastation is terrible. And we also really need a timeline of when these reforms, if they are brought in for CWI victims, will take effect. Because again, people have been waiting years. Campaigners have been banging the drum for a decade. And what's happening is, if these homes aren't repaired, the longer they sit unrepaired, the worse the disrepair gets. And the more it affects people's health and pockets. And most importantly, we want to know what immediate financial support will be provided for homeowners requiring extraction and repairs. And so we are making a call to action. For MPs, we are asking you to push for immediate reforms to guarantee genuine consumer protection. We are asking you to help secure financial support for victims to cover extraction and repair costs, and to hold energy companies and regulatory bodies accountable. To the media, we are asking you to please support us in our mission, as you have been doing, and this really is appreciated. But we need to keep banging this drum. And so we're please asking you to keep highlighting those real life victim stories to amplify the human impact. And we're encouraging investigative reporting into rogue traders and failed government oversight. And the next steps for us are we'll be following up meetings with MPs and government representatives, and we will continue to engage with the media and to apply public pressure and expanding the support networks in help for victims. So I'll just pass over to Debra, who'll facilitate a Q&A and the closing remarks.
Thank you, Laura. Just a couple of points to pick up on. One of the things that we didn't mention earlier was that when people try and claim through the guarantee company, they're told that they can't do any work to the property. So this is why the properties decline over time, otherwise they're invalidating the guarantee. So the whole guarantee system needs completely looking at. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Does anybody have any of the reporters have any other questions that they want to ask on that last segment?
Debra, Katie here again. Can I just clarify then the point of the meeting today? Obviously, I missed the start of it, so it's to call on local MPs to back the campaign.
It's to highlight the systemic failures of cavity wall insulation schemes the
Yeah.
devastating impact on homeowners, and to call for immediate government intervention. And, you know, we request the media support in helping us to publicise what's going on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
What concerns us as well, Katie, is that, you know, we have like hundreds of people in our group, but how many more thousands are there out there that don't have any support because they don't know that we exist? And that's a major concern for us. A lot of victims don't speak English. So there's a lot of hard to reach people that are desperate for support. So we just want to invite those that are affected to come and join us in the support group, because I think, you know, the people on the call tonight will sort of, you know, have already said that without the group, they don't know what they'd have done, you know, or who to turn to. And together we're stronger, because like we've been invited to meetings with the Solicitors Regulation Authority. We've been invited to meetings with the Legal Services Board, who are now investigating the SRA. We've been invited to present for the Legal Services Consumer Panel. And we've also spoken with, is it Fair Civil Justice, Laura?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and so like as a group, we listen to and we can put forward the views of victims and try and make progress. Whereas individuals, it's like, who do they turn to? You know, they go to their MP, but the majority of the time, you know, because the MPs are dealing with the odd individual, they've not got the strength behind them of the group. So this is why it's really important. We won't be ignored. We will not be ignored. We won't go away. What we want is, we want transparency, we want justice, and we want the truth to come out as to this whole fiasco, which, as it was reported on in Parliament, this is a scandal upon a scandal upon a scandal, and this is far bigger than the post office scandal. So we encourage any investigative journalists who want to get really under the bonnet to work with us.
Debra.
Thank you.
Yes.
Debra, it's Debbie. Can I also add the fact that it's not just people with limited English, it's also shame. You know, it's misplaced shame. I realise that now. But a lot of victims don't come forward because of that fear of shame. That, you know, it was targeting elderly, disabled. They don't have the technological know-how to reach out. You know, it's massive. It is absolutely massive. We only have the tip of the iceberg that's reached out to us.
Yeah.
Only the tip.
You're right, Debbie.
Thank you.
And also on this meeting, we haven't even touched on the SSB side of things, really, you know, with like the devastation caused by the bills and that side, because this meeting specifically was to raise awareness about the properties, because, like, you know, people have got professional negligence claims in process, so we can't comment on that in this forum. But the professional negligence claims are completely irrelevant to putting the properties right. People can get the debts hopefully back to zero, but who's going to put the properties right? And, you know, we've got people living in such appalling conditions, as you've heard. It's affecting the health, the well-being, and something has to be done quickly. So that's our plea. So I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank those representatives from the Victim Support Group for attending and for sharing your stories. Without you, the media can't do their job. And it's important that your voices are heard. So thank you, everybody. And I'll stop the recording now.